The Ground Floor Bedroom by Red Nova Tyrant. The first night I had heard the tapping, I had just ignored it as nothing. My bedroom is on the first floor of my family's house and is the only one on the ground floor. Everyone else is upstairs, which I always joke that I'd be the only one to survive a fire since I'd be able to escape faster than any of them. As well, my window faces our small suburban front lawn, next to the street and sidewalk. There's a garden bed of roses my brother and I built for Mother's Day one year, though we just let it do its own thing these days instead of tending to it. This resulted in one particularly annoying branch of thorns that sways in the wind at night, and had a tendency to smack against the window. It was one of those annoyances that make you sigh, but you don't really care enough to deal with it. So when I had first heard the tapping, I didn't think much of it. It was just a rosebush after all. I didn't think much of it the second time, or the third, and soon enough, I'd lost track of the number of times the tapping had woken me up. So it caught me by surprise one night when I listened a bit more carefully and found that the tapping sounded louder than usual. I sat up groggily and reached around for the blinds, trying to move them aside enough to look outside. The branch was just swaying as normal, but when it did hit the glass, it wasn't as loud as I'd previously heard. My window also had a bit of a draft, and the wind didn't sound nearly strong enough to make the branch hit very hard. Confused, I just laid back down in bed and went to sleep. The next night, it woke me up again. It was louder than it had ever been. I growled, being awoken from my slumber, then quickly pulled the blinds away to look outside. The branch was still, and there was no wind. A slight shiver trickled down my vertebrae, with my imagination jumping to the conclusion that something had been at my window. I told my parents about the tapping the next morning. My dad thought I was just overreacting, and that the wind had been blowing hard enough for a minute just before settling down. He got out the garden trimmers and cut the branch that afternoon. The tapping continued the very next night. Now I was getting spooked. Upon being woken this time, I rushed to the blinds and lifted them. Nothing was at the window that could have made sounds, but the moon was out, and my heart leapt into my throat when I noticed what showed up in the moonlight's reflection. Fingerprints. I woke my parents up and told them that someone had been trying to get into my room at night. My dad checked out the flower bed but found nothing. No trampled grass. Nothing. But the fingerprints were evidently there. He just said that someone must have put their hand on the window whilst doing some yard or housework. Heck, he even suggested he might have placed his hand there for balance the day before when removing the branch. Though I was skeptical and still a little worried, I accepted his response. I decided that the next night I'd sleep on the living room couch, also located next to a window. It was irrational, sure, but my mind was too uneasy to sleep in that bed, next to the street, where anyone could have been running up to my window and freaking me out in the middle of the night. Eventually, I got comfortable in an awkward position and welcomed the embrace of sleep. I woke up to the tapping yet again. For the next few nights, I slept around in different rooms, both near and away from windows. I wasn't going to sleep in my parents' bed or with my brother in his room. I was a teenager, and teenagers don't do stuff like that. But the tapping was driving me nuts. It continued following me around every night, and despite many sleepless nights waiting for the tapping to come so I could immediately rip the curtains asunder, there was no sign of anyone or anything causing the tapping. Eventually, I came to the conclusion that the tapping was probably in my head, possibly even coming from my dreams or nightmares, and that I was going to keep hearing it as long as I believed in it. So I returned to my room and tucked myself under the covers, staring at the blinds that blocked my view of the night, and soon enough, sleep came. The tapping came yet again, but this time it stopped abruptly. For a moment I thought that it was over, that I had overcome this craziness. That was until I heard a wooden creak, the sound of my window opening. I flung off my covers and immediately yanked up my blinds to find the face of a bald man staring back at me. His eyes were fully open, unblinking, bloodshot to hell and back. His facial hair was ragged and patchy, with scratch marks and tiny drops of blood pooling where the skin was most bare. I could see his skin stretched out mercilessly over his bones. and his crusty fingertips were inside my room as the window was open a whole inch, dirt lining the very small edges of his clearly well-bitten nails. My psyche couldn't take it anymore. I screamed louder than I had ever screamed before in my life, and as I heard my parents rushing downstairs to my aid, the man took off from our yard, only wearing a pair of stained workout shorts as he passed under the streetlight and disappeared into the night. The police found no traces of the man. He had been standing on the bricks of the flower bed, leaving no full footprints for them to use. There also weren't enough fingerprints to go off of. They theorized that he had just been tapping the window with his index fingers over and over, since some of the prints matched each other. All I know is I'm never sleeping on the ground floor ever again. Coexistence by Sean Cognition CP. The mind, the hollow void of your skull and electricity that keeps you alive, based on ever-changing but firm instincts. The very mass that is you, your consciousness, all in one small, fragile pack of tissue. But as we all know, electricity can be manipulated. You can be manipulated. Everything you know, say, think, and do is all electricity. Like an overgrowing photography collection, everything passes through the brain to be confirmed and then remembered. As an old saying goes, you forget 1,000 things every day. So if the brain was such a good firewall, why would you still see shapes in the middle of the night, eerie noises haunting you, only to be confirmed as something else? Well, it's simple. Why are humans afraid of snakes, storms, and war? We learned our lesson. We found that these things kill us, and we should stay far away from any source of these events. So as for the shapes, we learned our lesson. We found that these things can also kill us just as the previous threats. What phobia is pulling the threads, telling your brain to be wary of something you were told you were making up? All the studies, all the facts, and yet you still fear your midnight hallucinations. It is less simple than many would like to prove, but can still be summed up in one word. Coexistence. Just because humans forgot these beings exist, does not mean they have not slaughtered us in the past, and they certainly have not gone away. These stealthy beasts have taken kids who were declared missing. They look like anything they can copy. That is why human and beast-like shapes both appear. You forget 1,000 things every day. Don't forget again. Casual noises. Have you ever stayed up too late trying to get to sleep? Tossing and turning to find a comfortable position to rest in, but you can't. Whatever reason it may be, legs are getting too warm, pillows getting too warm, not enough blanket on one part, etc. Alone in the darkness of your own room at night. Now here, this is your own little sanctuary in the day. You know where everything is. Everything from your collection of video games and movies to your laptop riddled with more videos and images of the latest Girls Gone Wild parties. It's an entirely different room when no light can or will enter. What I'm trying to get at are those quick and sudden pops and cracks you hear when the room gets too quiet. Ever hear those? I mean, of course you have. They could be frequent. Or they could just be dormant for most of the night. Maybe only a single snap. Most of us would simply brush it off because it's such a frequent phenomenon. It happens so often, so why would you care? Most of us probably find some way to explain it to comfort ourselves. Well, the heater is on. It flows through the vents, and the metal expands when it's heated, so that's what those pops are. It's such a small, casual thing. A casual noise. No one thinks of it much at all. No one bothers to pursue it all that much. Such a little noise with such a little value. Let's face it though. Regardless of how you think of it, you follow them. Every little pop seems to be coming from another spot in the room. Your room. You follow not with your eyes, but with your head. Pop, turn left. Pop, slightly right. Pop, straight up. You can follow with your head. But can you follow the noise to find out where its source is? Wouldn't it be the strangest thing if these pops weren't coming from the vent? If they had another source? But what could they be? Here's an odd question. What kind of flooring do you have? Hardwood? Carpet? Walk on the flooring, and you get a noise. Hardwood will creak loudly. The carpet will creak a bit fainter. Take this into consideration when you hear these noises whilst you sleep. It may not be, say, a heater like you think it is. There is little to no distinction between making the floor react to footsteps and the pops and snaps you hear at night in your room.